وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله سبحان ربك. Brothers are requested to come close, inshallah.
So what we can do is we can do it without those slides. You can do that part where you show the first one. So is Faisal? Oh, there he is. Oh, he's here. Are you standing or are you sitting? What do you prefer? Sitting is good? Sitting is good, yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakallah everyone for giving up your time. I know it's precious after Asr on a Friday. Just want to introduce myself to those of you who aren't familiar with me. My name's Dr. Faheem Shakur, and I'm a general practitioner in Blackpool. Over the course of the next 50 or so minutes, leaving a few minutes before Maghrib, with my colleague and good friend Dr. Faisal Aslam, who's a psychiatrist, will be speaking a little bit about Ramadan mental health and also the physical health. This is a bit different to other talks, and usually when only one aspect is covered. Usually it's either physical health or mental health, but we're trying to do both to make it the most benefit to you, because I know how precious this time is. We're both quite friendly, open to questions. Obviously, we have a large audience, people listening at home, and obviously those here. So we can't take specific medical questions. It's for a general audience. So I hope you understand, but I'm happy to take questions after the presentation individually as well. I'm going to pass you over to Dr. Faisal Aslam for the first beginning section, and then we'll have the second section, myself, on physical health. I hope you find it beneficial, and may Allah reward all of you for taking the time and effort to come and sit with us in this gathering. I hope there's some barakat in it. Jazakallah. Over to Faisal.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Faisal Aslam. I'm a psychiatrist based in Bolton. I work at the Royal Bolton Hospital. Jazakallah khair for coming in to attend to the event. And Jazakallah khair Faheem Bhai for inviting me and being a part of the good work that he's doing. He's a very dynamic fellow, Dr. Faheem. So I'll make a start. Done. Okay. So we talking about Ramadan and mental health, and so we'll start with a bit of a talk about mental health, and then we'll move on to how Ramadan, how the mental health could be affected in the month of Ramadan and how we cope with it. So first of all, we'll talk about, is there a big screen there? Yes, of course. So what is mental health? So by definition, mental health refers to our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Now, what is emotional well-being? So emotional well-being is to know our emotions, to deal with them positively, like knowing what's going through your mind, what's happening right now. There could be difficult times in life when one could feel a bit angry, a bit irritable. So it's about knowing what's happening with me right now and dealing with it efficiently and in a positive manner. Psychological well-being is being in a good mental health mental state, being happy with yourself. And social well-being is, having these healthy relationships, these positive, healthy relationships, which sort of positively impact on our mental health. Mental health affects the way we think, we feel, and we behave. So, just to give an example, very quick example, if we're feeling a bit negatively and we feel that we're useless, for example, and then that makes us feel miserable and we do nothing. We're just thinking in our mind that we're useless. Compared with if we think positively and we feel, no, we are capable, we're able to do things. So if we think positively, then we feel good energy, and then we act positively, get involved, do things that's beneficial to ourselves and the society, our communities as well. So it says mental health can vary and be dependent on a number of factors, which may include the number of demands and the stressors we have. There could be demands in life. One could have a very busy job, an unfulfilling job, that could affect our mental health. And the stressors in life, like the big ones, is if we lose a loved one, financial stressors, relationship issues, social stressors. Mental health is dependent on our physical health. The physical health and mental health go hand in hand. If we are in a better physical health, it affects our mental health positively. Like, for example, what scientific research has found is that, if one has depression, there's a high chance of them developing heart disease. Not everyone with depression will have a heart disease, but there's a high chance that you could develop a heart disease. And likewise, if someone has a heart disease, there's a high likelihood that they may develop depression. So it goes hand in hand. Significant events as described above, bit before, loss of a loved one, for example, how much sleep we get, essential to have 6 to 8 hours of good continuous sleep, quality of our relationships, our diet, environmental factors. For example, if you wake up in the morning, it's cloudy and it's raining outside, you may feel miserable. And the very next day, if it's sunny and you wake up to the sunlight, and you may feel happy. So those are environmental factors. Talking about environmental factors, one of the examples could be an earthquake, for example, that happened in Turkey and Syria very recently. So it could lead to sort of mental health issues, like people developing, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder. Societal factors, cultural factors, they come into play as well. Very important to engage in leisure activities, whatever you like, going for a walk, going to the park, going on holidays, watching your favorite sort of football match, or doing any other leisure activities. Very essential to do them. So what are mental health problems? So we all have a physical health, and we all have mental health as well. And we need to take care of it. And good mental health generally means, that we are able to think, feel, and react positively in the way we need to. But if you go through a period of, are there any questions so far? No. Okay. And if you once going through a period of poor mental health, so it may affect the way they think, feel, and behave. Some people, they could be angry. Essential to have a check on them to see if it's this anger is affecting our relationships, the quality of our relationships, our social well-being. So very important to address those issues. Scientific research tells us that 1 in every 4 people in any given year will have mental health problems. They could range from depression and anxiety to the less common ones like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So very important to seek help if you feel you going through mental health issues. So how do we spot them? How do we identify them? What are the early warning signs? It could be, not eating and sleeping well, pulling away from people, not getting involved, having low energy, feeling numb, unexplained pains and aches, feeling helpless and hopeless, not doing what you're supposed to do, not showing up at your job, and not dropping kids off at the school. Some of the other warning signs that we could see is people starting to drink, take drugs, feeling confused, forgetful, yelling at or fighting with friends and family, mood swings, hearing voices when no one else is around, something we call as hallucinations in scientific terms. And if it gets very severe, then people may have thoughts of harming themselves or harming others. So important to identify it, pinpoint it, and seek help. So what are the challenges that we face in terms of our mental health during the month of Ramadan? Important to know that this is happening, important to pick it up, important to be mindful of them, and then addressing them in the right manner. It could range from, people feeling irritable, having a reduced sleep. That's a common issue during the month of Ramadan. Having difficulty with concentrating, anxiety, anger, aggression, changes in personality. Like people could have mood swings. They could be happy one moment, in a couple of minutes' time they could be unhappy, angry, or sad. People could start doing things on the spur of the moment. One of the common examples that we see is people starting spending, start gambling. So that's something that has changed. It's not there before, so it has happened now. So we need to sort of make sure we address it. So how do we look after our mental health in the month of Ramadan? So we need to keep informed, sort of know what's going on in the local masjid, know what the guidelines are, have a routine and stick to it as much as we can. Get up and go to bed at similar times. There's something called sleep hygiene. So maintain that. It's just sort of simple things like going to bed at around the same time every day, not exercising a lot before going to bed, not having caffeinated drinks before going to bed, avoiding tea and coffee just before going to bed. So if you get into a routine, then that makes it easier, then makes it helpful. You could Google sleep hygiene. It comes up with a plan. There's lots of guidance there, which one could read. Healthy diet, exercise. I mean, one could sort of walk to the masjid, park their car a little away from the masjid. So essential to get that bit of an exercise, whatever one could tolerate, considering the month of Ramadan, of course, one's fasting. Important to have enough rest. Make sure you're rested enough to be ready for the next day of Ramadan. So, and make time for doing things that you enjoy. Sort of, it could be just sitting with your family after you've had your iftar and have a cup of tea with them and have a chat with them. Essential to have this human-to-human contact rather than spending time on social media and in front of the screen. Minimize news feedback. I mean, we don't have to be, we don't have to know what's going on in the world all the time. Sometimes you have to take a step back and take it easy. Social contact, as I said, very important. Have to have this one-to-one with family, friends. Screen time, very important. What we find is we spend a lot of time sort of looking at our mobile phones, looking at our WhatsApp messages. Important to have this human-to-human contact, which could make us feel better. Again, try to avoid video games as much as possible, less time spent on social media. Getting involved in the community-based activities, like, doing volunteering at our local masjid, volunteering at our local food bank, for example, and helping people out, helping our neighbors. And to be in the sort of present moment, it's very important to be mindful of what we're doing at the moment, rather than being physically there and mentally elsewhere. So very important, and that could come with practice. If you just practice mindfulness and look, here I am in the masjid, I'm talking, got a mic in my hand, I've got my audience right in front, and to appreciate the present moment, it's very important. Gratitude, say Alhamdulillah for everything we have in our lives. We got our family, we got a job, we could put food on the table. So, we are blessed. Doing charity, especially in the month of Ramadan, it helps. Even if it doesn't have to be $1 million, 25p, 50p, one pound, whatever we could afford, we could sort of contribute towards making someone else's life better. So that takes me to, if someone has a mental health condition, how do we take care of it? So there's a common question that we got asked, whether one could take medication. So most of the psychiatric medication, the time could be adjusted, so it could be taken in the evening after your Maghrib. So once one has completed his fast, it could be taken later on, but essential to speak with your doctor to change the schedule. to keep in touch with the people who care for you, like if someone's seeing a psychiatrist or a GP for their mental health reasons. Important to continue with the follow-ups, important to continue to see them and to seek advice if there is any deterioration in the mental health. So what are the benefits of good mental health? It creates a positive self-image. One feels capable, one has good positive energy, one has a higher self-esteem. It leads to healthier relationships, positive, fruitful relationships. And one could realize their full potential. If they say, for example, they're doing a job, they could do the job very, very well if they're in a stable mental state. And they could cope with the stresses of life better, work productively, contribute to the community, overall have a higher quality of life. And if one has a good mental health, it could positively affect their physical health as well. So it goes hand in hand, as said before. I've put together a list of numbers and sort of websites that one could sort of use to seek help. So, of course, you got your GP, you got the A&E where you could go. So, the mental health help in the A&E is 24/7 now. So, that's something that you could seek help from. And then we've got Samaritan's Sane Line, National Suicide Prevention Helpline, Campaign Against Living Miserably and Shout. So we got the numbers over there, the email addresses, and one could communicate with them via text as well if one doesn't feel like talking to them. So you're more than welcome to take these numbers and sort of keep it with them if someone needs help. That could come in handy. And at the very end, I'll end it on a positive note that remember, you are more resilient than you think. And what is resilience? Resilience is toughness, ability to cope, ability to sort of deal with the difficulties. So Allah has given great capability to human being to deal with any difficult situations. So that takes me to the end of my talk, and feel free to ask any questions you may have. If not now, you could grab me in the masjid as well. I'll be here for a while. Yeah, go on, please.
There's still a stigma about mental health in the community. So if people in the households, Jazakallah for your talk. There's still quite a lot of stigma about mental health. So much more than physical health. So if somebody within the community or households is suffering from mental health, many people tend to hide it, not come forward, and thus they cut themselves from a lot of support. What do you say about that? I mean, how important it is for people to come forward?
Brother, it's an excellent question. Very good question, very relevant to our community. Indeed, there is stigma attached to mental health. It's important to identify if someone's behavior or personality has changed. It's important to seek help. It's important to talk about it. and that could be done in complete complete confidentiality, and to seek help, to seek the right kind of treatment. I had a private firm's chief executive who had bipolar affective disorder, and I was having mood swings, right? So he was admitted to our unit, and so the family was finding it really hard to cope with his change in personality. So what we found out, he wasn't taking his medications, so we put him back on his medications. And I kept couple of weeks time, he was out of there, and he was nice and happy, and he went back to his job, never came back. So essential to identify it. We had a young man back in Pakistan who all of a sudden he said, I'm gonna run in elections. And then he went around and he started to sort of print those leaflets, and then he started to bring people together, and he would sort of serve them meals. And he said, I'm the future superstar, I'm gonna be the prime minister of this country. So he sort of wasted a lot of money, wasted a lot of resource. But then when he found the help, he was diagnosed with having an episode of mania, and then he was treated, and he's back to his normal self. And then last time I went back home, I met this guy, and he was completely normal, on treatment. Does that answer your question? Any other questions, brother?
There are more questions. We can take them, but I won't have chance to speak. So it's up to you all. I don't mind. We'll take one more and then I'll start. I think, Bilal, you said you had a question. After this, I'll present, and then any further time for questions.
Yeah, it's just a quick question really. Is I want to know a little bit more about, because I'm a father and I've got young children, and you've not really touched upon how social media affects the children. And my understanding of mental health is that if you have a tough upbringing when you're younger, that can reoccur as you get older. So that's number one. And the other thing is that when you're on your phone all the time and you're not communicating with other people, then when later on in life, when you get a rejection, then that becomes harder to take because you haven't took the hits when you're younger. So that must be a challenge now for me, for my children, for a lot of young kids out here, because life is not very simple. It's not easy. There is going to be times where things get tough. And what advice can you give to me as a father for the upcoming future for my children, really?
Brilliant question. Faisal, I don't want to be in your shoes to answer this. So
the thing is, we all got kids, we all got younger ones. It's essential, it's a busy life, I accept that. But then A is making sure that we taking care of them, they are in good state of mental health, they are not being bullied at school. If the kids, they come to you, they report any such issues, has to be taken up with the school. We see a lot of adults with mental health issues who had a difficult childhood. So essential to protect them whilst they're kids, right? Essential to sort of expose them to different situations, to have a chat with them, take them to the park, take them outside, have them involved in activities, healthy activities. Like, okay, all right, you want to play football, you want to do swimming, you want to sort of play with other kids in a safe environment. So that's very important. And the second question was to do with the screen time, was it?
Yeah, the second question is more about, because there's less interaction now with other humans, you're less likely to be rejected. But it's when you go into the workplace, for a lot of the youngsters that here, when you go into the workplace, you don't get your first job, or you don't get the qualifications that you want, or you don't get the pay rise that you want, or you get rejected by the first or 2 or 3 girls that you go for a target, you get rejected, and that can really, really be detrimental to someone's mental health.
Yeah.
How do you, where my generation, you had your knockbacks and you build that over the time.
Yeah.
The younger generation, build that strength in them.
You know what? I failed a lot of exams, right? But I passed a lot of exams as well. And every time I failed, I just got up and I started preparing again. It's important to have these conversations with these kids. They are kids of 2023, not 1986. It's important to open up to them. It's important to know that life is not just, you get everything you need, everything you want. There will be hiccups, there will be difficulties, there will be tough times. It's important to for example, when they play taekwondo or karate, there's they learn a lot of restraint. Look, when I have to take a step back, when I have to take a step forward. To my kids, what I do is I tell them very clearly that don't expect to hear a yes from me every single time. So, and as I said before, important to have that human-to-human interaction, because we're spending a lot of time on our screens, right? All got mobiles, all got WhatsApp, and they're watching, right? And they're picking it up consciously or subconsciously. Now, we are the role models for them. We cannot just ask them to pray and we don't pray. It won't happen. So we have to pray in front of them for them to sort of pray. So we have to become a role model for them, have to have this conversation, have to have this exposure. And I hope this answers your question, but I'm happy to have further conversation about it with you, if you'd like to.
Jazakallah khair. Imam Sahib, I think you can see the amount of interest in the psychiatrist here. So we're running short on time, Jazakallah. I know you spent many hours of preparation to do this presentation, so big thanks, and may Allah reward you, Faisal Bhai, for your comments and your preparation. So over the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to be going through a whistle-stop tour of physical medicine, really to do with Ramadan. Just a little bit about what I'll be hoping to do is about why it's important, some quick strategies, just some few pointers. And again, I have quite an informal style. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So we'll be talking about thinking. Sorry, down. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, thanks. So we'll be talking about, obviously, healthy Ramadan, thinking healthy, eating healthy, moving healthy. As I said at the beginning, just a disclaimer, please don't take any of this as personal medical advice, especially if you've got diabetes, kidney, heart disease, other medical conditions. You should seek your healthcare professional, which is most likely going to be a GP, for advice. And the opinions expressed are those of myself and not of BIMA. A little bit about BIMA. It's a volunteer-led organisation of Muslim healthcare professionals present in most regions across the UK with strong Islamic values and ethos. And so it obviously gives some principles and values in our working life. So, importance of health in Ramadan. That's a nice family photo, as you can see, with traditional food there on the table. The importance is that it upholds goodness, as we know. We know the reasons we're doing it. We have many scholars in this whole array of this whole schedule for this whole month who've been talking about the spiritual dimension. So we know the reasons for actually fasting. We also know that Muslims have a harder deal than the rest of us, the rest of the population, in terms of health inequalities. There's evidence to say that we're some of the poorest people in the country. There are Muslims needing to use food banks, as sad as it is. So we need to bear this in mind in terms of that it's not fair everywhere across the country and what we can do to help each other so we have the best Ramadan possible. There's a lot of Muslims who are medicated as well, whether that be insulin, other medications, on the list of medications that they might be on for either the heart, kidneys, and so on. So compared to the general populations, we have far more medications, and they have side effects. They can interact with certain foods. It's worth bearing each of these things in mind. So why we fast? We know all this is an act of worship to achieve taqwa. We know these sort of things. But there are secondary additional benefits. As a doctor, I'm interested in those, things like weight loss, lowering cholesterol, blood pressure, glucose, mental resilience, and all things. But we don't need those sort of things. We're told to do it, so you do it. And our blessed Prophet, peace be upon him, did it and recommended fasting as well, as we know. And there's a lot of benefits. If he said to do it, you do it. The importance is planning as well with anything that you might know. Failure to plan is a plan to fail. I think that's a good motto, maxim for life. Going back to what the previous question you were saying about the sort of difficulties, some of it's to do with failures is planning. If you're not planning, then how are you expecting to get a good result from this month? And that usually means starting in Shaban or even earlier to make sure that you've got an idea. But it's not too late. We're a week in now. Today's Friday, 31st of March. For those of you who are watching later on and not live, we're a week into Ramadan. There's still a lot of time. It's all about the finish, as they say in the races. It's not how you start, but it's how you finish. Be positive. We know that shaitan's locked up, so all of our good deeds are being remembered. Try and stop any of these vices. I mentioned smoking in particular because it is a big thing in our community. We need to admit that and commit to trying to stop this. This is an ideal time. For other people, it's food addictions, sugary foods and so on. This is an ideal time in this month to try and give up these sort of things. Also be positive about improving physical activity. There's a big saying about you can't outrun a bad diet. You might have heard of that. As in the food is the most important thing, which it is. People have different percentages, 80% food, 20% exercise, different sort of ratios. But improving your physical activity is going to be a very big boon in this month. Simple ways that we can do it, looking at the audience here, is walking to the masjid, I live about half an hour away. It's a nice walk here, Tarawih and home, But even if it's you come for Fajr to the mosque or so, incorporating it into your daily life is what makes things easy. And it will help to try and maintain your cholesterol, weight, and other things as well. Thinking healthy is important. I don't want to talk too much about the psychological because I think Faisal Bhai covered it really well over the last 20 minutes or so. But obviously the physical and the mental health are combined like this. Don't see them as two separate things. We often compartmentalize it, physical and mental. But that's why today deliberately I wanted us both to speak. So you see the importance of both things together. They're not in isolation. And it's more than the sum of their parts. So when you put it, it still has a bigger effect when you put it together. So key areas to prepare, obviously you've got routine, sleep, food and drink, and health conditions. As I mentioned, preparations very important, as we have done in Shaban. For those of you who are working, obviously asking your employer for any assistance, whether that to be to do with on-call rotas, onerous duties you may have in the workplace. I think there's a lot of appreciation for what Muslims have in the workplace and how they can help them. So a good employer or line manager will really help in that situation. Think about your previous Ramadan experience. I'm sure all of us have had a good Ramadan experience. Maybe some were better than others. So try and focus on the ones that were really good. What did you do well? And why was it so good? Did you have a strategy? Did you do something different? Were you exercising more? Were you eating healthily more? Did you have a suhoor which was nutritious, protein rich? Did you have iftar, not too much? What was you doing last time that worked so well? Bring it again. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel in these sort of things. And set goals for yourself. I mean, we've got such a fantastic lineup of speakers this month. They've been talking about food for the soul, but there's also food for the body and Ramadan planners. There's one there. There's quite a few available commercially, I believe, as well. But they're very useful. I find it quite useful. And when I talk to people, it's useful. You can tick things off. There's an achievement in ticking things off. Today I managed to do this and this one. I managed to pray this much and so on. And this will help you psychologically, and that will come into your physical health as well. In terms of preparation, exercise, is very important. I don't like to prescribe what exercise you do, and that's because we all have our own interests. Some of my friends are here and they like badminton. I'm unfortunately unable to make it, but I prefer walking. Some people do swimming, sunnah sport, horse riding, archery. We know all the sunnah sports, but it's about doing what you can inculcate in your life quite easily and which you can manage in the time that you have. Okay, so there's no need to start a new sport per se in Ramadan. You don't want to get yourself an injury, yeah? So you have to be realistic. But maybe just try and think that, maybe after iftar I can do a bit of light exercise. It's not going to be a bad thing, yeah? And it's going to be helpful for Tarawih and also for sleep afterwards. So sleep is about quality and quantity. I could speak an hour on sleep. It's such a big thing. I mean, we go through about a third of our life sleep, in this sort of unconscious state, and what does it mean, and all the hidden meanings of it. But definitely, the night is for sleep generally, and obviously daytime for working, but sleep is about the quality. So things about caffeine, that will have an impression on how your sleep is like, quiet environment, consistent schedules, avoiding electronic devices. It goes back to what Faisal Bhai was saying about sleep hygiene, which you can easily find on the internet. Reducing coffee and sugar. I know a lot of people have this as an addiction. And really, it's a crutch because you don't particularly always need it. Yes, I understand coffee is in the Muslim civilization. It comes back from those days. I understand that. But if you're needing something to get through each day, then that's an addiction, isn't it? By definition, it must be. Whether that be alcohol or you need something without it, you can't. That's an addiction. So there are healthy addictions. Obviously, we're in an Islamic setting here, Quran and so on. There are healthy addictions, but there are also unhealthy addictions. So, in this time that you have 30 days, you can form the habit and the self-discipline. People say you need about 3 weeks to form a habit. So even if you've had a lifetime of not having a healthy lifestyle, that can all change. Like I said, everything's still to play for, okay? Nothing is lost at all until right at the end and the month's finished. So if you look at the graph here, this is interesting. On this side where you can see the improvement, you can see how a little bit, and you can get better every day. That's what it's getting at, the power of tiny gains, okay? A little bit will make a big effect with over time. And the best way to make that achievement is if you share that with your family. Everyone knows that. For instance, those who stop smoking. When you tell 5 other people, I'm going to stop smoking tomorrow, because you've told people, you're more likely to do it than if you just do it on your own, because then you're not accountable to anyone. That's what people use personal trainers for and things. You're accountable to someone, aren't you? Yeah? So that's the idea of sharing goals with other people. So some demonstration of some healthy foods there. Obviously, we've got the traditional, the sunnah, obviously the dates. And dates are interesting because obviously the more commonplace in the Middle East, but they actually have a lot of the protein, carbohydrates, fiber, and it gives you that energy that you need. You don't particularly need too much, but there is a lot of health benefits. So I think there's still a lot about dates. We don't understand why they're so beneficial. But as I said at the beginning, if the Prophet took it, then that's good enough for us. This is the Eat Well plate. You probably may have come across that on the NHS website. So what it's trying to show is the distribution of sort of foods. It can be common at iftar time to do a mountain of food, but that's not a plate of food, that's a mountain. So this is a flat thing, and as you can see, you've got the whole grains, which are in yellow. The green is the fruit and vegetables, which should be a really big part of either suhoor or iftar, and then protein, and then water and milk, of course. Now, I mentioned milk, that's interesting. Many of us, I can see a South Asian background, will have a lactose intolerance, okay? But there are other variations available nowadays, soy milk, almond milk, and so on. But water and milk are going to be quite useful this month. The other thing to bear in mind is obviously having a low salt diet. Now, if you have too much salt, you're going to get thirsty. Bad idea, obviously, in Ramadan. It's going to make your Ramadan quite difficult. In addition to that, having too much salt obviously has issues with blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks, kidney stones. The recommended guidelines is 6 grams or less. I mean, that's going to be hard for the person going to Tesco or someone to read on the guidelines, but you get the idea. Is basically try and avoid any added salt, okay? And that's something to take from after Ramadan as well, even if you like your fish and chips and so on. And everything's okay in moderation, but try not to add extra salt. And you can see some sort of ideas of the things which are high salt foods there. Potato chips is a big one, and some of these sardines and so on, and processed foods. Now, processed foods often get a bad press, and rightly so, compared to organic. But coming back to what I said at the beginning, Muslim health inequalities. We don't all have the money to buy organic food all the time. I know my community, we don't have that. So I'm not going to go too much down the way, you have to eat organic food, organic, because that's not practical for the community that we have. Sometimes it's got to be canned food, sometimes it's got to be shelf food and things like this, especially if we're needing to eat things from the food bank and so on. So I think we need to have more compassion. As much as I like organic food and all of these other things, we've got to be practical. Low fat. Now, obviously, low fat's very important. Obviously, you don't want any excess. I've given you a whole range of the fried foods and so on that you can see on the right-hand side, from the fried chickens and French fries. A lot of it's takeaway food, and a lot of it's common sense, isn't it? But common sense isn't always that common, sadly. So we know this, but again, it comes back to the marketing of this. That's why we have things like sugar tax and so on. They're marketed often in close by to schools as well. You'll see often, sometimes in London and so on, a lot of these fried chicken places and so on. They're quite cheap as well compared to buying other food. So I don't have an issue with people who try it. I don't feel too bad why they're doing it. I can see why you're doing it, but just be mindful. It's all about being mindful, coming back to what Faisal Bhai said earlier about being mindful about what you're buying, mindful of what you're putting in your mouth. Think twice. Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Often you're thirsty, but you feel you're hungry. Try a glass of water, see how you get on. Good fats. Fats often get a bad idea, but you got good fats, olive, avocado, nuts. I mean, avocado oil is great for cooking, for those of you who cook here as well. Olive oil is more for dressings, for salads and so on. People have air fryers, grilling, baking. But yeah, try and replace with the healthier olive oils compared to maybe some of the sunflower and other oils that are available. Now, sugar I will take a bit of time on, because this is one of the big addictions that's in the nation. And I'm sure I'm guilty of it as much as the next person. Sugar has a big impact in terms of your risk of diabetes, stroke, and what we call insulin resistance as well. So wherever possible, you want to try and keep the amount of sugar low. I mean, if you were to ask, like in terms of a normal cereal, does anyone know here how much teaspoons of sugar is in, like, say, a bowl of cereal? 6? Yeah, it's just over 6, 7, yeah. Teaspoons. Now imagine that. Would you eat a meal with 7 teaspoons of sugar in it? But that's what you're doing if you have cereal. Yeah? So it's about thinking about it, it's packaged as a good thing, isn't it? All these variety packs and things you get. I like looking at them. So I can see the attraction. But actually, when you think, how much sugar is in this? What am I actually having? You have to go granular. You have to look carefully at the actual food itself. But you're right. Timmy, you're right. It is roughly that sort of a thing, and we need to be careful about these things and things. Why are we not trying maybe poached egg or something? Yeah. Why are we not trying, traditional foods we have in our community? Things like panjiri. I'm sure some of you have heard of panjiri. Yeah, I can see some nods there. For those of you who don't know, because I didn't know about it, it's basically, in a way, it's sort of like dressed up fruit and fiber. It's got nuts and so on, a bit of ghee and other things, almonds, but it's very healthy. If you were to have that with some milk, dates, blended, this sort of a thing, peanut butter and so on, banana, you're onto a winner. Low meat. I'm going to mention this. I had a conversation with our imam recently, and you said the Prophet ﷺ was semi-vegetarian, if you remember. What else do we need to say about that? We need to be semi-vegetarian, don't we? Meat was something that the affluent used to do, eat certain times like this. But actually, most of the time, meat wasn't being consumed, so we overeat meat. And that's because we have it at everywhere. When we go out to eat, it's steaks, these sort of things. Meat is a big part of our life and culturally so. And I appreciate, walima, you're recommended to obviously have these sort of meat dishes and so on. It is there in our customs, but generally try and avoid as much meat. You will generally do better if you're having more vegetables. And that can be cultural as well. Certain parts of the world, you eat less fish, vegetables. Culturally, you're brought up to eat more meat. Yeah, I know that. But it's about going back to the sunnah and these sort of things. And like, when I spoke to the imam, what was the sunnah? What were they eating? How much were they eating? And it's a lot less than what we're eating. Generally, it was a lot less than what we're eating. So fish obviously has a lot of benefits, which I've mentioned. Obviously, you've got obviously the fish oils and so on. People are using that in medications as well nowadays, fish oils, because of the recommendations. Oral health, obviously I'm not a dentist, but we have the miswak, we know about that already. But bad breath, halitosis, obviously use of miswak, avoiding the fizzy drinks. And when I speak to dentists, they say try and drink with a straw instead of actually from that, because obviously it's going to the back of the mouth. Flossing, going to see the dentist. This is important because a lot of us don't actually have an NHS dentist as well. Okay, I could do a random straw poll in the audience here, but I don't want to embarrass anyone. But some of you would say I don't have an NHS dentist, and I know that because of the patients I see. I know this, yeah. So it is hard to always have an NHS dentist, but try your best to get some sort of dental care that's available. Time is really running short now, so I'm just going to wrap up at this stage and just mention a little bit about exercise. Obviously, we've got the 150 minutes, which works out about 21 and a half minutes per day when you divide by 7. I've done the maths of moderate exercise, and obviously it talks about strengthening activities. These are all good. People talk about the 10,000 steps a day. There is some evidence this is going to work, and that's because generally most of the population walk less than 4,000 steps a day. There's evidence to say we're not even walking 4,000, so that's why we're pushing it up to 10,000. I hope I've given you some ideas what to do for Ramadan. I'm sorry I've had to be quite quick, but what we've realized is there's a lot of interest in the psychiatric causes, so obviously the previous presentation took a lot of our time. I will end with saying that in terms of health conditions, if you do have any specific health conditions, many of us in this room or listening at home will do, please seek advice from your health practitioner, especially if you're changing diets in a vigorous way, especially if you're on insulin, for instance, and diabetes, things like this, okay? And these are some of the common situations that we can run into, obviously heartburn, headaches, constipation, dehydration, but try and drink more water, you know, especially things like iftar time. Try and have a healthy suhoor, try and eat less at iftar, be like the Prophet, eat very little for iftar, you know, so these sort of things are worth bearing in mind. I hope that's been helpful. Ashhadu an la ilaha wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayka. And I'll end there. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
I'd just like to personally say thanks to both Dr. Faheem Saba and Dr. Faisal Aslam for accepting our invitation, and inshallah in the near future we will call them, invite them again. Jazakumullah khair.